Parents handed over the house I bought to my sister, so I stopped paying and it got sold. All right, so here's how it went down. Picture this. I'm 28, working my butt off in tech, living frugally, sharing an apartment with two roommates to save every penny. I wouldn't call my parents poor, but they've never been financially stable either. My folks have had their fair share of money struggles over the years, my dad especially, always switching jobs, sometimes laid off, trying different things to make ends meet. They've always been on the edge of being okay and just barely scraping by, if you know what I mean. Growing up, my sister Perry and I didn't exactly have the same treatment. She's 3 years younger, and man, she's always been the favorite. They let her do whatever she wanted, like she could never really do any wrong. She dropped out of high school, didn't have any plans to go to college, and pretty much floated around, doing odd jobs here and there. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. My parents always had these big expectations for me, always hinting that I had to be the one to make it, because Perry, well, she wasn't going to. So they stretched their savings thin and took out loans to get me through tech school. They made it clear that this was my shot to make something of myself, and they were counting on me to pull through. They were upfront about how they sacrificed for me, how they could have spent that money on themselves or saved it for retirement, but instead, they invested in my future. And honestly, I didn't see anything wrong with it back then. I figured, yeah, they're just doing what any parent would do. They wanted me to succeed, right? So I kept my head down and worked hard, thinking, one day, I'll pay them back and everything will be fine. After tech school, I landed a good job. It wasn't anything huge, but it was enough to start saving and paying back some of the student loans, which honestly was a weight off my shoulders. I'd send them some money here and there. Not too much because I was still setting up my own life, but enough to help out. Every time I sent something, Dad would remind me of the big sacrifices they'd made, hinting that there was still more they deserved. This was mostly through subtle comments like, "Don't forget where you came from," or "Remember who got you here." Real subtle, but I got the message. Then one night, I'm back home visiting for a few days. It's the first time I've been able to take some real time off, and we're sitting around the dinner table just talking. Out of nowhere, Dad brings up how they're still renting and how it's tough not to have a place to call their own. He talks about the rent hikes, the noisy neighbors, how tiring it is to move every few years when the lease is up. Then he looks straight at me and says, "We're just wondering when we can stop living on rent and finally settle down, you know?" I kind of laugh it off, thinking he's just venting, but then he goes, "You should think about buying us a place, son. You're doing well now. We've done our part to get you here." I'm sitting there, halfway through my meal, just blinking at him like, wait, what? It hit me that they were dead serious. My mom chimes in, all supportive, saying, "It would really mean the world to us. A place we can call our own. You're the only one who can make that dream come true." In that moment, I felt trapped. They were right there, staring at me, and I didn't know what to say. On one hand, they did pay for my education and support me growing up. But on the other hand, buying a whole house for them? I'd just started my career, and here they were, talking like I should already have enough saved up to buy them a house on top of my own expenses. I tried to laugh it off, saying, "Dad, I'm barely paying rent myself. I can't afford a house for me yet, let alone for you guys." But they brushed it off with a smile and this knowing look, like they believed I'd figure it out eventually. Over the next few months, they kept dropping hints. Every phone call, every time I'd visit, there'd be a comment like, "It would be so nice to settle down somewhere," or "All we want is a small place, nothing big." And they'd follow it up with the usual reminders about sacrifices, how they didn't have a choice but to drain their savings for my school, how much they went without. I couldn't even argue with them. Everything they were saying was true. They had put everything into my future, and they did make sacrifices. But it started to feel like they weren't giving me a choice either, like they were pushing me into a corner. Guilt was their tool, and they wielded it well. Eventually, I caved. After years of saving and cutting back, I managed to scrape together enough for a down payment. I wanted to do it for them, partly because I felt I owed them, but also because I thought it had finally put an end to all the guilt trips. So, I bought them a house. Nothing crazy, just a simple place in a quiet neighborhood, but it was theirs. I was still sharing an apartment, but I thought, this is a good thing. They'll finally be happy, and maybe now they'll let me live my life. For the first few months, they were thrilled. Every call I got from them was about how great the house was, how comfortable they felt, how proud they were to finally have a place to call home. They showed it off to their friends and family, and for once, it seemed like the constant pressure was lifted. They had their house, and I was finally free to start focusing on my own goals. But as much as I thought it would create distance, it didn't. The house only got brought up more. Mom would mention how they were making it a true home, and all the little upgrades they wanted. hinting that it'd be great if I could help out with those costs too. Dad would remind me of the mortgage payments, saying how we're all contributing to make this happen. It felt like every time I'd call, there was something new they wanted to discuss about the house. Still, I kept paying the mortgage, sending extra money whenever I could so I could close it off sooner. My life was just work, save, and repeat, but it felt like I was working towards something good. After all, I'd made their dream come true, right? I thought that was what mattered. But every time I'd look at my own savings, I'd get that sinking feeling. I was still just getting by, making all these sacrifices for a house I couldn't even live in, while they sat comfortably in what was supposed to be our accomplishment. So, now that my parents had the house, I figured things would finally chill. I thought they'd back off a bit, you know? I mean, I'd done something pretty huge for them, but the whole favorite child thing with my sister Perry just kept creeping back in, and it was like the more I helped, the more they leaned on me. I kept telling myself it was no big deal, but I was starting to feel more like a wallet than a son. Perry's always been treated differently, even though it's obvious to everyone but my parents. Growing up, she was never held to any standards. She dropped out of high school, got into stuff that didn't really pan out, and kind of drifted from job to job. But in their eyes, she was just finding herself, or exploring her options. They always found a way to paint her choices in some forgiving light, while I was told to stay focused, work hard, and basically make something out of myself so I could support the family. When I was in high school, it was pretty clear who they were betting on. I got drilled about my grades, career plans, and any move I made. Meanwhile, Perry could bring home F's on her report card, and Mom would tell her that not everyone's cut out for school. She could do no wrong, and I was the one expected to set the example. They saw me as their insurance, the one who would go out and make sure everyone was taken care of. Perry was like the family pet, except, she got everything handed to her. So here I am, paying for the house while they're treating it like it's her space too. I didn't think too much of it at first. After all, it was technically their house, so if she wanted to come over or stay for a weekend, it wasn't really my business. But then I'd get these weird comments from my parents about how Perry really loved the new place, or how she'd been staying there for days at a time. They even started talking about how great it would be for her to settle down nearby. That little hint just kept popping up every time I'd visit or call. Every single conversation with them started turning into some variation of, "It's so good for Perry to have stability nearby." They'd say things like, "Maybe she could live here while she figures things out." They'd say it in a casual way, like it was nothing big, just something to think about. But I'd worked my ass off to buy that house for them, not to fund a place for Perry to crash whenever she felt like it. A few months in, I realized that her little visits weren't just visits anymore. She was practically living there. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I asked Mom about it directly one day. She gave me this vague answer, something like, "Oh, well, she's just here helping us out around the house." Helping with what, though? Every time I'd visit, Perry was there, just lounging around like she owned the place. One weekend, I decided to pop by unannounced. I hadn't told them I was coming because, well, I wanted to see for myself what was really going on. I get there, and it's not my parents who open the door. It's Perry. She's wearing pajamas, looking super comfortable, like this was her place. She seemed surprised to see me and actually asked, "Oh, what are you doing here?" As if I was the one intruding. I remember just standing there, a little stunned, trying to process why she was acting like she'd been there for weeks. I go in, and the whole house is set up with her stuff everywhere. There were clothes and bags and makeup strewn around. It was like she'd moved in, no question about it. I ask her, "Where are Mom and Dad?" She shrugs, saying they're out shopping or something and won't be back for a while. I sit down trying to play it cool, but inside I'm fuming. We sit in this awkward silence for a few minutes, and I just can't take it anymore. I go, "So, are you staying here for a bit?" She just shrugs again, saying, "Well, it's a nice place. Mom and Dad don't mind me hanging out here." I wanted to tell her off, say something like, "Yeah, well, maybe I mind," but I knew that would blow up into something bigger. So instead, I just nodded, biting my tongue, trying not to lose it right there. When my parents came back, I brought it up casually, saying something like, "Hey, I didn't realize Perry was staying here." They just laughed it off, saying she needed a place to stay for a while because things weren't working out with her roommates. I knew exactly what that meant. She'd probably gotten kicked out or couldn't pay her part of the rent. But of course, my parents would never actually say that. To them, it was just another harmless little adjustment in her life. Nothing was ever her fault. That night, we all sat down for dinner, and the entire time, they kept praising her for helping them out around the house. I couldn't believe it. They were acting like she was some kind of hero for being there, while I'm the one actually paying for the place. Every time I tried to bring up something related to the house, they'd steer the conversation back to Perry, how good it was for her, how she was finally getting her feet on the ground, and how this was just what she needed to get on the right track. It was like I wasn't even part of the picture anymore. They were making this house about her, as if my sacrifices didn't exist. After that night, I couldn't shake this feeling that I'd been duped. I didn't sign up to buy a house for Perry. I bought it for them, thinking I'd be giving them security. But it started feeling more like I was financing Perry's new life. I left that visit feeling frustrated, like I'd walked into a trap I didn't even know was there. It was becoming clearer that my parents had a blind spot the size of a house when it came to Perry. I couldn't help but feel like I was being taken advantage of, and it was getting hard to ignore. The next time I talked to my parents, they dropped another bomb on me. They started talking about how settled Perry seemed to feel in the house and how great it would be if she had her own space. I tried to laugh it off, saying, "Well, she's got to find her own way eventually, right?" But they just looked at me with these blank stares, like I wasn't getting it. And I realized then that they had a different idea about what her own space meant. All right, so here's where things went completely off the rails. After that last visit where I'd walked in on Perry just lounging around the house, I figured she'd be moving out soon. Or at the very least, she'd help out if she was planning to stay longer. I thought maybe she was just crashing there temporarily, like we all do when we're going through something. But a couple of weeks later, my mom calls me up, all casual, and drops a bomb on me. They'd actually moved out. Yeah, you read that right. My parents moved out of the house I bought for them, and Perry had moved in full-time instead. I sat there, phone in hand, trying to process it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, I bought that house specifically for my parents, thinking it would give them the stability and peace of mind they deserved. And now, out of nowhere, they just handed it over to Perry. No heads up, no conversation, just a casual announcement like I'd have no problem with it. I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, "Why would you move out? This house was for you and Dad, not for Perry." My mom just laughed, brushing it off like it was no big deal. "Oh, honey, we needed a fresh start. Besides, Perry needs the house more than we do right now. She's trying to get her life together, and having a stable place to live will help her a lot." She said it so matter-of-factly, like it was the most logical thing in the world. "She's trying to get her life together," she explained, like that justified everything. "She needs stability, especially if she's going to have a family someday." I was just sitting there, stunned, trying to wrap my head around what she just said. Stability? What about the stability I'd been working toward? What about all the sacrifices I'd made to make sure my parents had a decent home to live in? And now, out of nowhere, Perry was just taking over, and they hadn't even bothered to ask if I was okay with it. Finally, I asked them flat out, "So, are you saying Perry's living there full-time now? And what about the mortgage? Who's paying for that?" My mom's tone shifted, sounding almost defensive, like I was accusing her of something. "Well, honey, you're doing well for yourself now, aren't you? It shouldn't be a big deal for you to keep paying a bit longer. Besides, she's family." There it was, the "you're doing well" line again, as if my hard work and all the sacrifices I'd made meant they had free access to whatever I'd built for myself. I tried to keep my cool, but it was like a slap in the face. I said, "Mom, this isn't what we agreed on. I bought that house for you and Dad, not for Perry to live rent-free while I cover the bills." She sighed, sounding exasperated like I was the one being unreasonable. "We thought you'd understand. She's struggling and she doesn't have the same opportunities as you. You've always been the responsible one, and we're just asking you to help a little longer." At that point, I was barely holding it together. "Help a little longer? Mom, I'm paying for the entire thing. It's not a little help. I've been paying extra every month to get this paid off faster, thinking it was for your stability. Now you're telling me you just handed it over to Perry without even asking me?" My dad chimed in then, trying to sound calm and reasonable, but he came off more patronizing than anything. "Son, we didn't think it'd be such a big deal. We know you're financially stable, and Perry could really use this. It's just until she gets back on her feet." "Gets back on her feet?" I said, my voice rising despite trying to keep it in check. "She's been getting back on her feet her entire life. When does it stop being my responsibility to fix everything for her?" They just sat there, looking at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. Finally, my mom said, "Well, maybe we shouldn't have assumed you'd be so willing to help your own family." The way she said it, like I was the bad guy, just hit me hard. It was like no matter what I did, they'd always find a way to turn it on me. I got up to leave, saying, "Look, this needs to change. Either she pays her part, or you guys do, but I'm not just footing the bill for Perry to live for free in the house I'm sacrificing everything for." They didn't respond, just looked at each other like they were disappointed in me, as if I'd let them down somehow. Driving home, I felt more frustrated and betrayed than I ever had before. They'd pulled this move, blindsiding me with a decision that impacted my life in a huge way, and then they had the nerve to make me feel guilty for not wanting to just go along with it. It was like all my hard work and everything I'd done for them meant nothing. Back at my place, I tried to calm down, thinking maybe I was overreacting, that maybe I was being selfish for wanting a little say in how my money was being spent. But the more I thought about it, the more it sank in that I wasn't being unreasonable at all. I mean, who just hands over a house that someone else is paying for without even asking them? What kind of parents do that? And what kind of sister just moves in without offering to help out, without even considering that maybe this wasn't fair? I felt like I was at a crossroads. If I kept going along with this, what was next? Would I be expected to fund every little thing they decided to hand over to Perry just because I was doing well? Would I always be the backup plan, the one they could depend on whenever they needed money? I thought back to all the years I'd worked to get here, all the sacrifices I'd made. I'd spent my life trying to make them proud, working my way up so I could give them a better life. And now that I'd done it, it was like I was just a resource to them. Not a son with his own dreams, but a wallet. And Perry? She wasn't even remotely grateful. It was just expected that I'd step in and fix things for her whenever she needed it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep paying for everything without setting some boundaries, or this was never going to end. If they saw me as their financial safety net, they'd never stop taking, and I'd never be able to live my own life. So I made up my mind. I was going to have to set some hard limits, even if it hurt them, even if they didn't understand. Because at the end of the day, I'd spent too long sacrificing everything for a family that saw my success as theirs to spend, and I deserved better than that. After that last call, it was clear I had to make some tough decisions. The whole situation had gotten out of control, and if I didn't set some hard limits, they'd keep taking from me until I had nothing left. My parents had moved out without a word, turned my house into Perry's place, and had the nerve to use my extra payments to cover their rent. They didn't see a problem with any of it, and that told me they'd keep pushing until I put my foot down. I took a couple of days to think it through. I wanted to approach this calmly, not just come in guns blazing. The plan was simple. I'd tell them I wasn't going to keep sending extra payments, and if Perry wanted to live there, she needed to start contributing to the mortgage or move out. It was time for some real boundaries. So, I called my parents and told them we needed to talk face to face. They weren't thrilled, but agreed, and I headed over to their new place. The tension was thick when I arrived, and it was obvious they knew what this was about. We sat down, and I didn't waste any time getting to the point. "Look," I started, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "I found out from the bank that the extra money I've been sending hasn't been going toward the mortgage. I don't appreciate being kept in the dark about where my money's going." My dad tried to wave it off. "It's not a big deal. We needed the extra to cover rent since we moved out for Perry. You're doing well, we didn't think you'd mind." That "you're doing well" line again. I was so sick of hearing it. They used it every time they wanted something from me, like the fact that I'd worked hard somehow made it my job to fix all their problems. I took a deep breath and replied, "But I do mind, Dad. I bought this house for you, not for Perry. And the extra was supposed to pay off the mortgage faster, not fund a second place for you. I can't keep doing this." My mom gave me that disappointed look she'd perfected over the years. "Honey, Perry needs stability. She doesn't have the same opportunities as you. We thought you'd want to help your sister." I was so frustrated I could feel my patience slipping. "Mom, I'm already helping. I bought the house, I've been paying the mortgage, and I even sent extra. But Perry's an adult. If she wants to live there, she needs to contribute. This isn't fair to me." Dad shook his head, looking annoyed. "You're being selfish. We've done so much for you. Isn't it time you gave a little back to the family?" I felt my temper rising, but I kept it together. "I am giving back. I've been giving more than enough. But I have a right to set limits, and right now, the limit is that I'm only paying the minimum mortgage from now on. If Perry's staying there, she needs to pitch in, or she has to find somewhere else to live." They both looked at me, clearly unhappy, but I didn't back down. I'd rehearsed this in my head so many times that I knew exactly what I needed to say, and I wasn't going to let them guilt me into caving. "This isn't about not caring," I added. "It's about fairness. I worked hard to get here, and I deserve some respect for that. I'm happy to support you guys, but not like this. My mom sighed and tried one last time. We thought you'd understand. Family takes care of each other. Family also respects each other, I replied, feeling more firm than ever. I've done everything I can to support you, but I have to draw the line somewhere. I need to focus on my own life too. If Perry wants to stay, she needs to help out. If not, then I'll figure something else out with the house. There was a long, uncomfortable silence. They weren't used to me talking like this, and I could see they didn't know how to react. My dad eventually muttered, "We'll talk to Perry." It was obvious he wasn't happy, but he realized I wasn't backing down this time. I left, feeling drained but also relieved. For once, I'd stood up for myself without feeling guilty about it. I didn't know what they'd do or what Perry would say, but at that point I didn't care. I'd done my part, more than my part, and it was time they started respecting that. Over the next few days, I heard nothing from them. No calls, no messages, just silence. Part of me wondered if I'd gone too far, but every time I replayed the conversation, I knew I'd done the right thing. I'd been bending over backward for years, and it was finally time to put my own needs first. Then, one afternoon, my mom called. Her voice was calm, almost resigned. She told me they'd talked to Perry, and she'd agreed to start contributing to the mortgage. Just a small amount. But it was something. She sounded disappointed, like she still couldn't believe I'd actually asked for it. But I didn't let it bother me. "That's good to hear," I said, keeping it short. I didn't want to drag this out or get into another guilt trip session. I was just relieved that for once, they'd actually respected a boundary I'd set. Hanging up, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was relieved, yes, but also sad. I never thought it had come to this, having to argue with my own parents just to get them to respect what I'd worked so hard for. But I knew it had to happen. If I didn't stand up for myself now, this would be my life forever, constantly giving, constantly being expected to cover everyone else's mistakes. In the weeks that followed, things were quieter. They didn't push as much, and there were no more sudden changes I wasn't told about. For once, I felt like I was actually living my life for myself, not just as a backup plan for everyone else. I won't say everything's fixed. I know they still see me as the responsible one they can lean on, but at least now I've drawn a line. And if they cross it, I won't hesitate to remind them of where that line stands. It took me years to get here, and I'm not going back. After that last talk, I knew it was time to walk away. I'd tried everything, reasoning with them, setting boundaries, even offering a compromise to keep things fair. But no matter what I did, it always ended up the same. They saw me as their safety net, not as their son who also had his own life and goals. So I made the decision I should have made a long time ago. I stopped paying the mortgage. I was prepared for the fallout. The calls started almost immediately. At first, it was my mom calling every day, sometimes multiple times a day, leaving these long-winded voicemails about family obligations and how disappointed they were in me. She'd remind me of all the things they'd done for me growing up, making it sound like I was some selfish jerk who'd abandoned his family. Then my dad joined in. His voicemails were sharper, more frustrated. He'd say things like, "We raised you to support your family. We thought you'd always be there for us." But to be honest, I was numb to it. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I'd given them everything I could, and they'd taken advantage of it. This wasn't my problem anymore. Eventually, when I kept ignoring their calls, they ran out of ways to reach me, but that didn't stop them. They started calling from different numbers, sometimes even borrowing friends' phones to try to catch me off guard. I'd see an unknown number pop up and hesitate, just in case it was important. But sure enough, it'd be another voicemail from my mom, going on about how family doesn't abandon each other, trying to guilt trip me right back into covering the mortgage. But this time, I wasn't having it. I blocked every number I could recognize, and when new ones popped up, I blocked those too. I think what hit me the hardest was realizing that, for them, this was normal. To them, family meant I'd endlessly give, no questions asked. It never crossed their minds that I might have my own life, my own dreams. They couldn't see me as anything other than a bank account with a voice on the other end of the line. With no one covering the mortgage, things unraveled quickly. Within a couple of months, the bank took over the house, and before long, they put it up for auction. I'd been expecting it, but there was a part of me that felt the sting. This was supposed to be the home I'd given to my parents, the home I'd sacrificed so much for. But after everything, it wasn't really my loss. They decided Perry was entitled to it, and I wasn't going to keep throwing money into a place I no longer had a say over. I'd had enough. When the house sold, Perry and her husband had to move out because they had no way of paying for it themselves. The calls started coming from Perry too, though by then, I'd already blocked her number. I didn't want to hear her sob story. didn't want to hear about how unfair it was that I was taking away her stability. She had been given every opportunity to step up, to help out, to at least take some responsibility, but she'd done none of that. And I wasn't going to listen to her whine about it now. Then came the guilt-laden messages from my parents. Even after the house was gone, they didn't stop. They tried to make me feel like I'd betrayed them, calling me ungrateful and selfish, saying things like, "We never thought you'd just walk away from family." But to me, it felt like I'd done nothing but give to my family, at the expense of my own life. All they saw was that the money had stopped flowing, and that was enough to make me the villain in their story. It didn't matter to them that I'd spent years sacrificing my own goals to support them, that I'd bought a house for them with money I could have used for myself. They didn't care that I was just trying to make a fair choice. To them, I'd become the bad guy the minute I started standing up for myself. Last I heard, my parents ended up renting a smaller place in a cheaper area. They couldn't afford to keep up the lifestyle they'd been used to, and Perry had to finally figure out a new plan for herself. From what I've gathered, my parents have had to make some cutbacks, but they're managing. And Perry? She isn't getting her usual handouts anymore. She's on her own, for what feels like the first time in her life. As much as I might have felt guilty about it before, now I see it differently. She needed this wake-up call. Maybe now, without me as a fallback, she'll realize she has to put in her own work. As for me, I've finally got my own place. It's nothing fancy, a small apartment that I pay for on my own terms. There's a kind of peace in it, knowing that this space belongs to me and that I'm not constantly working just to fund someone else's life. I'm finally able to start saving up for a future that belongs to me alone. The idea of having my own house someday, one that's truly mine, is a goal I'm actually excited about. Looking back, it's wild how long it took me to see the truth. For so many years, I'd told myself I was just doing what was right. That family meant giving everything you had. But somewhere along the way, family became a way for them to take and take without ever thinking about what it cost me. It's a harsh realization, but I needed it. I wasn't just their kid, I was their wallet, and as much as that hurt, it's helped me draw the line I should have drawn years ago. They say hindsight's 20/20ths, and I guess they're right. If I'd known how things would turn out, maybe I'd have handled things differently. But at the same time, maybe this was the only way for me to see the truth. All those years of guilt, all those sacrifices, I see now that it was more about control than love. They didn't want a son who was happy and independent. They wanted someone who'd take care of them without question. I don't know if they'll ever come to terms with what's happened. For all I know, I'll always be the selfish son who abandoned his family when they needed him. But honestly, I'm okay with that. They can think what they want, believe whatever story makes them feel better. But at the end of the day, I know I did the right thing by walking away. Now, I'm finally free to focus on myself. I'm saving up, making plans, building a life that doesn't revolve around bailing anyone else out. For the first time, my future feels like it's mine. And I can't even describe how good it feels to know that the things I work for will actually go toward my own life, not just get swallowed up by someone else's needs. It's taken me a long time to get here, but I don't regret it. If anything, I'm grateful I finally saw the truth and had the strength to make a change. Family should be about love and respect, not obligation and sacrifice. And now I'm finally free to live by that.